and we are recording. We are on the air in the United States of America.
That's right. That's right.
So last time we did a show, I said these crazy bastards are like Nazis, and you said, "Oh, I don't think this is accurate to compare them to the Weimar Republic," and I don't think all that's going on.
And I stand by that. I stand by that. I absolutely stand by that.
And then they stormed the White House, tried to hang the vice president. So, I think if they had been a little more, the only thing that they don't have that the Nazis had were the Nazis were a little better organized.
And an ideology. They actually had an ideology.
Yeah, that too. And they could execute, like, not like a person, but they could execute a plan. Like I think what's amazing is the Waffle House Brigade got in the White House and
the Capitol building.
Yeah. In the Capitol building and ran around and basically ran around like tourists. But if they had, if like Mr. Pipe Bomb had been in there, and they had been a little more organized, they could have exterminated some congressmen and they could have set the building on fire. So I guess we're lucky. I think we can just call ourselves lucky on that one.
So if I could, we've seen across the world proper coups. We've seen proper insurrections.
Absolutely. Myanmar right now.
Exactly.
Myanmar. Or whatever.
And I'm sure we'll get to that, but that was absolutely inevitable. Based on what happened in Myanmar and its history. But anyway, back to the U.S. Calling this a coup attempt, I think, is frankly a disgrace to other coup attempts. And
that's true.
I don't know what it was. To me, it just seemed like an insurrection. Maybe even then, I think that's giving it a little too much credit. In that it was so poorly organized, an insurrection would at least attempt to actually hit other things, because when you overthrow a government, you don't just hit one building. When I think about like the Tunisian revolution, there were protests across the entire country, and particularly in the capital city, that paralyzed the government. There was no such plan here. There was no plan at all. There was nothing. There was no popular support for it either.
Now, but their incompetence shouldn't get them off the hook. That shouldn't be like
legally.
They intended to do all kind of things, and
you think so?
Oh, I think so. I think there were people that had malice on their mind. That scene outside, where the girl that's the scene where the girl got trampled.
Yeah,
and that kind of battle, that medieval battle scene that was happening. That's something that's just unbelievable. That is like
unbelievable. That's for sure.
Yeah. Primal, crazy, insane. Beating up the police. I am not. We've covered the police in depth on this show
for sure,
and so it's very well documented where I'm at on all that. But I also don't think you should be dragging police down the stairs.
Agreed.
And beating them with hockey sticks and whatever, and killing them with. It was unbelievable. It's still unbelievable.
One of my biggest problems in all of this is people are saying, "Oh, the hallowed halls of American democracy have been attacked." Are they really that hallowed? Forgive me, but I lack sympathy for the congressmen in particular that voted for things like the Iraq War or the war in Libya or the war in Syria. These are the same people who spread terror across the world, and a little terror coming home. I'm indifferent.
That's true, and that's both sides. That's both sides.
Absolutely, and that's why I'm somewhat indifferent to it. As people are saying, "Oh, they're traumatized." You've co-sponsored and sponsored a lot worse.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
And so I'm this is why I don't know if it's this earth-shattering moment. And certainly, people thought that the Biden presidency was going to be a return to normalcy, and I think we've already seen that won't really be the case.
Well, you're only going to get so normal. You're in the middle of a pandemic. You're in the middle. There's a lot of, maybe not normalcy, but there is some type of order, right? And I think it was really needed. And I don't know if they'll ever get credit for this or not. But they show up and see the state of the vaccine program and see that it's all smoke and mirrors.
Right.
and that a tremendous amount of disarray is going on, lack of organization, and
as it
you
is in
know,
almost every country rolling out the vaccine.
well, yeah, right. But it's a
Right.
battle. It's a
Yeah.
battle for doses, right? So whoever gets the most organized and coughs up the most money.
Right.
And I mean, there's only so many doses that can be made because we're talking about living organisms and complex scientific product in a lot of instances, right? So
For sure.
it's a battle. It's a battle for them. And, you know, being, you know, having a guy at the top saying that it, you know, it's going to be gone any minute and that the election, you know, is a fraud and just all that nonsense or whatever, you know, return to normalcy. You know, what is that? What does that mean? The collusion between two parties to screw us all over? Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
We're back to that normal, but
right.
I'll take some order. Right. Yeah. And at a time when things are as bad as they are, where we're on the edge economically, and we're on the edge of a pandemic that's just crazy. How the Western world just has just the inability of the Western world to deal with simple things like stay out of bars, stay out of restaurants, put a mask on. And we've covered this 100 times on the show,
right?
But nobody else in the Asian continent, India. I mean, India, it's impossible to social distance in India in a lot of situations, and they have it under control. And
do they?
Yeah, I mean, they're actually, their downward trend is unexplainable.
Yeah,
and there were some reports earlier, late last week about like it is unexplainable. Like, is it their measures? Right. Is it a mutation? Is it, I mean, they can't explain it, or is it just a lull and they're about to get pummeled like the rest of the world?
Right.
But the downward trend that's going on in India is absolutely unexplainable.
And it's basically done in China.
Well, I mean, it's never done though, right? Like even about India, it's always as done as your weakest link, right?
Right.
So if you got flights coming in from South Africa, you can't shut it down, but you can stop it from hopping around, right?
Right.
But it's interesting. Like, you guys all had it, so you all had it, and everybody survived. So congratulations. It went through your whole household, man.
Yeah, thanks to my sister, oddly enough. But most I felt was taste buds and nose. Like, I couldn't smell. But you know, I with that understanding, it doesn't mean like, oh, it's not a big deal anymore because I experienced it. It was a big deal for me. Of course it wasn't. I'm a younger person. I'm still taking measures that I can, and then also not going out very much and wearing a mask when I do, you know.
Absolutely.
And there are people of my age who have had it because they go to school, right? And then they're not taking it seriously because they didn't feel much afterwards. And I'm like, that's not good. That's not a good sentiment because it's not a productive sentiment. And it's also a self-centered one, you know?
It's cool. You can tell we haven't done a show in a while because we're just rambling all over the place. We got
for sure.
We're storming the Capitol. COVID ripped through your house.
Yeah.
We got Biden in. We got
Biden's in.
Crazy policies and
and the Georgia Senate race is kind of
that in the background too. So let's change gears again. We're just flying through topics, man. So that was remarkable, and
absolutely,
and very exciting, and came down to the wire. And
for sure.
You know, Georgia sent
2 Democratic senators up.
Yeah, that's crazy. And one of them I really, really support. Well, I supported both of them. Because I couldn't stand the opposition candidates, right? And
well,
you know,
why?
Oh my God, Loeffler, you know, another billionaire that owns, you know, the stock market. That's great. That's a great idea. And you know what? She could really relate to the Georgians that she was going to represent. She was a good representative. You know, I think the insane QAnon woman from Dalton or whatever, I think she represents.
She's from Rome.
Whatever. She represents more. She had a condo up there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
She's from my hometown, actually. She's from Alpharetta.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Her daughter went to my high school.
she got a condo up there so she could run the gambit that she's doing now. But as insane as that woman is, I think she represents more Georgians than Kelly Loeffler would, because
you're
you
right.
know, that was, and she had never been elected, right? We got stuck with her. She got thrown in there,
right?
And so I was definitely anti her. And,
my favorite thing about her is her very put on accent. When she was in certain areas, she would try to put on like a southern accent. When I think she's from Illinois or something. She tried to sound more.
I was repulsed by her. And
yeah,
then,
and the insider trading, I absolutely understand. I was too.
But the Warnock thing, and I liked him. So it helps to like the candidate, right?
Yeah, right. For once.
And I like that guy. I got no issues with that guy. They took some quotes and stuff out of context that he said, but as far as a man that's representing his constituents, I think he represents a lot of them. And so that battle, that was great, right? The Perdue Ossoff battle, boy, that was a toughie, right? And that came down to, I'm already in the booth, and I don't like either one of these guys.
Yeah.
But it was such a big deal, right? Like you gave the Democrats the ability to get stuff done if they wanted to get stuff done. And you could really lay bare the collusion between the two parties and show that how much are they going to get done? And they won't get that much done, right? You know, it's not being run like McConnell was running it, where it was just, you know, there's talk of unity, there's talk of working together, there's talk of all this stuff. And that's great. But at the end of the day, you're not going to get it. So you better start steamrolling some stuff through, and let's see if that happens, right?
Well, if I remember very specifically Joe Biden and Warnock and also saying $2,000 checks, you know, when the senators get elected, you know, they're like that's what they're for.
Well, I mean, they're going for the 1.9 trillion. We can get to that in a second.
Yeah.
But again, you know, so John Ossoff never had a job, right? Never had a job.
Democratic Party operative through and through.
Absolutely. One of the last gifts from the Clinton machine, because the mom's a major donor to the Clinton machine, and literally one of the last gifts from that side. And if the other election hadn't been going on, if he didn't have the people already in the booth, he would have never beat him. But you had the people in the other booth. You had the people in the booth already, because the Warnock Loeffler thing got everybody in the booth. And for Democrats. And then it's interesting. The same phenomena on the other side, Sonny Perdue got everybody in the Republican booth. They got everybody in the booth. And so what's fascinating, David Perdue. Yeah, sorry. Sonny Perdue.
Not the Secretary of Agriculture, former governor of Georgia.
Yeah. Sorry. But thank you for correcting me on that. The young man corrects the old wise man. That's hilarious. That's good. It's not the first time it's happened. But anyway, so they're in the booth. You're in the booth already. So for convenience, you go ahead and click it and click the party line all the way down. What's interesting is 200,000 Democrats were in the booth and couldn't click for Ossoff. And then what's fascinating is 200,000 Republicans were in the booth and couldn't click for Loeffler. So it was almost perfect. So that's they weird. Couldn't, it was a bridge too far. Yeah. And I think that's fantastic, because I'm really close to that, right? From a standpoint that I can totally relate to a Republican that said, you know, I can vote for Perdue. I'm here for Perdue, but I look across at Loeffler and that's a bridge too far. And I'm in the booth and I'm voting for Warnock, but I look at this guy that's never had a job, and you know, I just can't do it. And it's a bridge too far. 200,000 on each side said that. Yeah. So that's pretty interesting to me. I think that's a fascinating fact from the numbers. Yeah. But so now we get to see what really happens or whatever.
I am curious what the Democrats will do when they send a majority. I think it'll be interesting no matter what. I don't think they will get much done. I would like to see something like overhauling the ACA. Like, that'd be very interesting, but they don't seem to be talking about that at all. And the $1.9 trillion spending bill to stimulate the economy. What do you think about that? What's your take?
So it depends, right? Like if you were giving Americans, not corporations, but you're giving, because we've already seen, it is great that you made everybody flush in the PPP thing, and
Right.
and full disclosure, I mean, I run companies and we did very well with the PPP, so it's not like I'm a hypocrite on it. That was fantastic, and it did allow us to protect some jobs and not lay people off. But we weren't going to lay them off anyway. We had committed early in the thing that we were just gonna run through it and all go down together or thrive together, right? But we were going to be able to survive it, and that's what we felt, even if we had to lose a little money for 1 year, whatever, right, to get through it. But the PPP made it actually a net positive, and it was fantastic, right? But it's not an efficient way to save the economy.
Not at all.
It's an efficient way to save businessmen and to save some jobs. It did save some jobs, but the most efficient way to save the economy is to give the money to middle and lower class people.
Absolutely.
It will vaporize, like it hits their bank account and goes straight into the economy. I mean, I feel that way about all programs, right?
Yeah, right.
I am more inclined to give money to people than I am to corporations. And I think that is like at the heart of a lot of conversations in American politics that nobody talks about. Right. But Biden and Trump are almost identical in their protection of corporations and their thought of corporations over people. So if the 1.9 trillion was going into, to use the cliche, Joe Plumber, if it was all going to Joe Plumber, right?
Yeah, right.
And it was going to single moms, teachers, firefighters, nurses, unemployed bartenders, unemployed movie theater attendants, unemployed movie theater managers. Like literally, if they were getting, let's just say double unemployment benefits, and then a nice little kicker every quarter that this nonsense goes on. So like, hey, you've been on unemployment, and everybody gets another 2,000 check this quarter just to help bridge the gap. And hey, you're on double unemployment, and here's another, you made it to another quarter. You know what I'm saying? If it goes to that, I support it, but it's a big damn number. And I think coming out of the gate, and you know me, right? I'm like, the verdict's not in economically, from an economic standpoint. If this will hold true, like zero interest dollars, and if you can't keep the interest rates at zero, the question always in any type of business is how much can I have, right? So they're pushing that to the absolute limit and taking it. But I think coming out of the gate, at beginning of the first quarter, I'm coming out with 1.9 trillion, unless they know something that we don't, or unless they're going to give it to the people that we just discussed. I think it's ridiculous, because what's right behind that has to be an infrastructure bill. Like, why can't it all be the same, right?
Yeah.
Why can't the infrastructure bill be wrapped up in that 1.9 trillion, right?
For
sure. It's crazy. So like, what's your thoughts on it?
Well, on one hand, I think the push for the $15 minimum wage is far beyond overdue, frankly.
Oh, absolutely.
Like it frankly should go up with inflation. That's what I would
absolutely.
I would peg it to inflation, because
and it didn't.
And it didn't. But $15 is double what it currently is. So at least the federal minimum wage. So I will certainly take that victory. I think the eviction moratorium is something that we don't talk about enough, but that's super important and a good thing. So that's one of the things I think is really good. Isn't there an increase in child tax credits too? Something like that. That's another good thing. There are some good things in here, that's for sure. The extension of the former temporary tax credits. There are lots of good tidbits in this, right? But the big picture is that it's not enough. And not enough in amount. It's not enough in like people. You said. Yeah, right. it's I agree absolutely, and this is Keynesian economics 101, that if you give money and government money to lower and middle income class people, that they will spend it and it will go into the economy, and it'll help businesses, it'll help the people themselves. It's a win for everyone, right?
Right.
That's Maynard Keynes' base
Absolutely.
point.
Right.
And that kind of mentality, I think, is absolutely necessary right now. Like if every American got $2,000 a month during this crisis, um, think about what people would do with that, and that would so stimulate the economy. And now, obviously, the other things in here, what's it, the vaccination program, another 20 billion to that, and so on and so on and so on. Like I said, there are good things in here.
Well, but still 20 billion to get the vaccine thing straight.
Yeah.
Which is the most important thing for long term.
Right.
Because now testing's shouldn't be a priority.
Right.
We're beyond that. So
Right.
you do testing and contact tracing are a priority on the front end, like March, April, May, June, July. That's when like those two things were really important. Now it's an infestation.
Yeah.
Testing and contact tracing are ridiculous. Now it's about, hospitals, first line care. And I mean, you don't have to test anymore because your hospitals are full. You know that you're infested, and if you get the sniffles, you need to stay away from everybody. And the money needs to go into vaccines. And the other thing that is just not, people should be laying down on the railroad tracks on this one, is that they're really trying to get the certain pieces of the population 2 shots.
Right.
And that's the worst strategy. I mean, I just cannot believe that more doctors and people in the know aren't just laying down on the railroad tracks saying, get everybody 1 shot.
Right.
And especially with the Moderna and Pfizer, it gets them to 84% efficacy. And so if you're at 84% efficacy, and then that means like of getting it, like it protects you from getting it, but it also gives you almost 100% protection against hospital and death.
Right.
That's 1 shot. So if you can give the whole population or
that massive increase in immunity,
you're so much better having, like, let's say half the population at 84% than 25% of the population at 95%.
Right.
I mean, just do the math. And you take half the population and then the 10 to 20% that have had this, like you and your family,
right?
Damn, now you're getting somewhere. And then you can start talking about, kids and getting people their second shot, because there's data in every other multi-series shot that's ever been done that if you can wait up to a year and it increases, it makes it stronger. So we're in the middle of some very stupid stuff happening around the vaccine, and hopefully somebody steps up and straightens it out. Because if you had them and they were overflowing out of dump trucks, just pulling up everywhere,
right,
and you were just stabbing them in people's arms as fast as you could, and there was no end, then this strategy makes absolute sense. But there's a finite number, and you're scrapping with the world, and they're not making enough, and it's a messed up situation. Like the Johnson & Johnson one. And I was having an argument with somebody today about that one, where it's got a 65% efficacy rate.
Right.
But they literally said it's almost 100% that you won't die. And it's almost the same that you won't need hospital care. And the person I was arguing with said, that's impossible. And I said, well, it sounds impossible, but people a lot smarter than me in this arena with medical degrees were saying that that's what the case was. And if that's the case, then that one's fine. Start jabbing everybody with it. My whole thing is, I think my whole family, if we got it, we would be as safe as you guys were. You guys were all good. I think we would be as safe as you guys were. But my whole thing all along has been, I don't want to kill somebody. I don't want to be the transfer point, the transportation of it moving from one node to another and killing somebody. I refuse to take part in that equation, and I refuse to go do that. And that's why we've fundamentally been locked up since April. And, you know, I've been to, I've raced in a couple of races, and we went to Wisconsin a couple of times, and took the RV and stayed out of, public places, bars and restaurants. But other than that, we've been, you know, hunkered down like you have. You've been pretty hunkered down. If a
Yeah.
relative didn't bring it into you, you
Well,
would have been fine.
yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Amazing how that works.
But you know,
Weakness in the bubble.
yeah,
Weakness in the bubble.
that's right. That's right. Um, and on vaccines, I'm not a public health expert. You know, I study German and international affairs, so I try not to comment too much on things I don't understand. You know, and this is why I leave that topic to people who know more about than I do.
Right.
You know, so that's my take on that. It does seem to me though that internationally at least, that every country is having immense difficulties with distributing the vaccine in a proper manner. And it's not unique to us, which is kind of comforting in a way, because a lot of our problems are unique to us. A lot of our problems are very American problems, right? And now we're experiencing the same problems that everybody else is, you know? And that's one of the I guess in a weird way, I find that no government having planned for mass vaccine distribution on a scale like this, right? That's not surprising, and that's kind of one thing that we have in common with the rest of the world for once. I'd like to switch gears to the GOP's counter stimulus plan.
I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I saw that it's like a third as big.
It's like a third.
I haven't seen it yet. So if you can bring us up to speed, that'd be great.
Well, it's not very important what the contents is, but it's all similar things. What, like, they're cutting the direct stimulus, and they're cutting some of the other the bigger items. Most of it's going towards just COVID, like fighting COVID itself on the medical front, and then I think $1,000 checks.
How is that possible? Where that party has stood around and said, "Don't wear masks," and this thing doesn't exist. How is that like the predominant focus now? Well, talk about a flip-floppy ass bounce around party. I mean, these guys are clowns, man, from a flip-flop standpoint.
In their defense, it's Rob Portman and those other, like, Mitt Romney Republicans.
Hey, he's looking good. Speaking of Mitt, I mean, he's looking semi-sane lately. I mean, I think if I don't know, man, that guy, he is. I have a lot more respect for him and the Cheney lady and just all these people that have stood up and just said, "Hey, enough is enough." I respect that.
Well, so what I was going to say is I want to talk about their framing of this, right? Because their proposal, and the reason why they're making the proposal, is about the deficit. It's about debt, right? And all of a sudden, the Republicans, when a Democratic president is in office, they come out the woodwork as deficit hawks.
Right.
But when Trump massively increased the military budget, that's fine. That's deficit spending that we're okay with. That kind of bothers me, and the whole framing the Republican Party takes bothers me.
That's what I'm talking about. It's a flip-flop. I mean, it just depends on who's talking.
But I
commit the same crime they're accusing you of.
Right. But why are they framing this as like a fight socialism thing? Like, why is that their frame? Because it doesn't seem very successful. Like, social conservative ideas are popular amongst large parts of the population, right? But also, $2,000 checks are popular amongst many of the same people. So why, if you're Mitch McConnell, if you're the leadership of the Republican Party and you're thinking about your next election, right? Why do you keep hammering the point about AOC and socialism and all these, boogeymen, but that are also decently popular boogeymen, right? Why frame that instead of talking about how the Democrats are, not getting things done for the people who are warmongers, like, and I just don't understand their framing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, but it's so there's a couple of things, right? And it's becoming really clear, the whole Robin Hood thing and the GameStop thing and the way that the media has been framing that. And let's just talk about the media for a second. We'll come back to this other one.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating looking at and reading various sources, especially in the financial world, and saying, hey, this isn't like little guy versus big guy. this is big guys versus big guys. And there just happens to be some little guys in here in this stupid app that's getting involved. But that stupid app is also tied to the big guys. So, like this is being like AOC and the media, and they're framing it as like the little guys getting squashed and just all this stuff. The little guy was never in it. You look at the long plays versus the short plays on this, and it was billions versus billions, and the little guys might have been the straw that broke the camel's back, or the tipping point, whatever you want to use, and cause the shift to happen, and the shorts got super squeezed. Right. But you had so much money. I mean, there's equilibrium, from a standpoint of what was long, right? The Chewy guy was long. One of the biggest, most corrupt payday lending guys was long. I mean, these guys were in very big positions. And then it turns out that, some very big things were tied in with Robinhood. But you look at how the press frames it or whatever, and it really got me looking at things like that as far as how the Republicans are framing things. And it's really it's the same way that social media is allowing things to be framed, because, Facebook will allow a right-wing nonsense fake news thing to get 100 million hits and just spread like wildfire. But there's money in that, and there's success in that for their platform, right? And there's success in ABC News talking about the little guy getting squashed. There's more money in that than, no, this is Titans going at it, and the little guys might have been the tipping point. That other narrative generates much more clicks, and there's more money in it. Well, the Republicans sticking to this socialism nonsense, and this I don't even use her name, this woman from Georgia that's, the QAnon lady that's constantly talking about all these conspiracy things and all this stuff. It's the same thing. It generates clicks and it spreads like wildfire. One of the key guys and key spreaders of the kind of this fake media movement said, everything we do, and he's an independent. He's a libertarian. He could care less which side won, but he says everything we do is right wing, because if we put it out there, it spreads like wildfire and generates 100 million clicks. If we do a left wing one and a Democrat one, it's debunked by the second post and it doesn't go anywhere. And so the Republicans keep hanging to all these dog whistles like socialism, AOC, and just all this stuff, because it got them 75 million votes. Those guys would have won the election again with the worst president of all time as their candidate. They would have won it again unless there had been the greatest get the vote going movement in the history of the country. That's what it took to beat the worst president of all time. It took 83 million votes to beat the worst president of all time. It took
all time.
It took 76 million votes to this clown stood on a stage in Helsinki and took Putin's word over our intelligence communities.
I would too. That makes sense.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say it. I wouldn't say it. You don't say it, but I mean, you might feel that way. But strategically, game theory, looking at it, that serves no game. That's ridiculous. You're blowing a guy that's not going to blow you back.
But the CIA are known, like they're known liars. They lie to get us into war. Like I'm not.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's one of the least egregious things I think he did. That to me is like, oh, whatever. The whole appointing your son-in-law as a high-ranking person, and that bothers me a lot more than the whole Putin thing. That's just me and my foreign policy bias. Maybe
let's just stack them. I mean, you can stack them. It's not like you got to choose one of
the
items that makes him the worst president of all time.
But, well, I mean,
he's the worst president of my lifetime. I view him as worse than Nixon, and Nixon killed millions of people.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Okay.
like body count wise, I know Nixon, I know that Trump was one of the best body count wise, but what he
Point I've
did,
made. Yeah.
yeah, what he did to you know, empowering the extremist movement in this country and setting us back 40 years in the civil rights movement and
Well,
just the whole thing. I mean,
you,
he's
you
he's a disaster.
what confuses me about Donald Trump and his movement and the Republican Party in general, it seems simultaneously incredibly ideological, but also not ideological at all. You know,
Right,
like
right,
they're so dedicated to Reaganism as an economic ideology, but also not at all dedicated to it.
right.
And for me, as someone who studies international politics, I try to frame things ideologically, right? And I try to put parties into boxes, right? And you can't really do that here because the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are the same thing, right? Like in policy wise, we talk about all the time. They have very similar policies, but then they have this like this post political divide where half of one party thinks the other party is full of Satan worshiping pedophiles,
They
and
are.
have an ideological divide that seems so stark, but it's not ideological. It's a social divide. It's a reality divide. That's what it's a reality divide, right? And
I
even
agree.
and even in said like reality, like the American liberal is still detached from reality in most cases.
Absolutely.
And I saw this article the other day. And the centrist wing of the Democratic Party never ever refuses a chance to attack Bernie Sanders. And the article said that Bernie Sanders was a misogynist because he took away attention from Kamala Harris during the inauguration.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's insane.
that right.
The
So
guy had one of the greatest fashion statements in the history of fashion statements. I
right.
mean, come on, man.
It's not like he went on stage and was like he didn't have a Kanye West Taylor Swift moment. Like
No, man. I
all he
mean,
did was wear mittens and a big jacket,
man,
and he is a misogynist. Like
Mitten Sanders, man. Come on now. We
I,
gotta.
of all the ways you could interpret it just boggles my mind. But see, those people, those like the K-hive types, right? Those who are like hyper dedicated to identity politics and that kind of left. I put that in quotation marks. You probably can't see it, but in quotation marks left,
No, I
right?
see
Right.
it.
Those people are also unhinged.
Right. No, they
They're
are. They are.
they're not, maybe not as factually unhinged as say your Quanon types, but they are unhinged. They see these patterns of it's always Bernie Sanders being a misogynist. That's the big one they always go after him on. Like they see this where there's no evidence of it. There's no actions that he's done that say he's this way, and that's the part of American politics I probably will never understand, is how you can have major wings of both sides that are detached entirely from reality.
Yeah, I think, it goes back to that same phenomenon that we were talking about a minute ago, where I think that was one of the rare times that the left stood up and said, "Hey, we can do clickbait too." And that's very clickbaitish to me, because like I don't know anybody that would listen to that would, click on that,
Yeah.
give it, share it, push
Yeah.
it beyond, right? But again, it kind of dies a little bit, right? Maybe a couple of people did it or whatever.
Right.
But I bet that got a lot of clicks on the right. And I bet anything that's anti-Bernie gets a lot of clicks on the right? And I like, just like the story about that Soros actually knitted the mittens for Bernie.
Oh yeah.
I mean, right? Like that story got a ton of clicks.
Wait, that's a real I thought that was a joke.
No, it's a joke, man. I'm kidding.
Oh,
but I
thank
mean,
God. I was like, oh, I mean,
could see.
you never know.
exactly, right? That's the world that we live in. And it makes more money to push these right conspiracies. I mean, you can see it, right? Like right now, I've been on a 30-day Facebook ban because I called a fascist a punk ass bitch. And the
You did you
fascist,
did you actually get banned from Facebook for 30
for
days?
30 days. I'm in the middle. I'm in the
Sorry.
middle of a 30-day Facebook ban because I called a fascist a punk ass bitch.
An
And
actual
and the
fascist?
yeah, and the fascists had just called me and all liberals everything that you can possibly imagine. And fortunately I have another Facebook profile, so I went in to see what had happened.
Oh, good.
And he got to just rampage on, and I got removed. And I'm telling you, the whole thing is biased toward that fire setting, spreading like wildfire rhetoric and clickbait and anger.
Mhm.
There's money in anger. I mean, it's
For
really
sure,
that
for sure.
simple. I mean, there's money and fear and anger, and one side, if Bernie stole the show, yeah, they're gonna be a little upset about it and maybe say some things or whatever. But there's clear, and in the past you could have had equal violence in the parties in the 60s. In the 50s, there was a radical communist movement, and the Weather Underground and blowing up things and stuff like that. And the right wing
Remember when Bill Ayers made his like 2008 comeback for
well,
like
but
a
I mean, like, and the right wing was shooting
yeah,
presidents and Martin
yeah,
Luther King and all that stuff in the 50s and 60s and stuff.
right.
But I think if you look now, um, one of the parties is clearly more violent than the other. And
Okay.
I think if it's Facebook and all these platforms, they have a responsibility to try to cull this and bring it back and reel it in, and they're just not doing it. I mean, they're not going to do it. They're in love with the profits. They're in love with what's going on. By banning Trump, it creates a firestorm that generates additional clicks and additional fury, and there's money in this stuff. And we're not, the bad news is it's not going to fix itself.
Of course
I
not.
don't know. I mean, in the movie The Social Dilemma hits on a piece of it, right? But it's more from like what it does to teenagers and how we're all addicted to it. Have you seen that movie yet, The
I
Social
have not.
Dilemma?
No.
Oh, you should definitely see it,
Okay.
especially with as much as we talk about social, and the impacts of social on the show. It's a must see
Mm-hmm.
for everybody that has a smartphone. I mean, it's critical. I mean, the game theory and the lessons learned from slot machines in Vegas that are deployed and employed on our smartphones
Right.
against us. We got to take an inventory of that, and that movie does a very good job of taking an inventory, at least providing a gateway to you if you want to go see what's really happening and what's causing all this stuff to go on.
Okay.
So yeah, definitely go check
I
that
will
out.
certainly have to check that out. But when Twitter banned Trump, I I I thought that was tragic.
Tragic.
Yeah,
Boy, that's a
absolutely.
serious word.
It is. It is.
Tragic. I thought it was.
More from the humor perspective.
Well, I mean, I thought
Because
it was.
I enjoyed many of his tweets, and I really missed the way he tweeted.
Yeah,
So,
I 4
sometimes
years was plenty.
I know I don't think it was. I really
Oh, it
don't.
was so. You know what? I was done. I was done after the first couple. So
I, yeah,
I
fair
get where
enough.
I get where you're going with it, because you're going to go down the censorship trap. I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
hear where you're going.
yeah.
But I think one of the big lessons in this, and that everybody needs to take, and it's a lesson from the German experience, is that the tolerance of intolerance
Oh, okay,
cannot
Carl.
be.
All right, Karl Popper. I see where you're
You
going.
can't. But it's not the same. It's not the same, and you cannot tolerate the intolerant.
Okay,
Free speech has limits, and
okay.
this guy had incited violence, and it had incite. Do you think that he incited the riot at the Capitol?
Negative. I don't think so.
That's insane. That's insane.
No, here's when everyone makes the Nazi comparisons, right? But Mr. Hitler had direct like he had orders during the Bergamo Putsch. He said, "Go do that, right?" He said, "Go attack that building, go attack Munich and try to seize the city." And Hitler
Burn the Reichstag.
yeah, right. Well, and Hitler also laid out his ideology on paper in the form of Mein Kampf. Like he said, we're going to get Lebensraum in the East. He said, we're going to, end European Jewry, etc. He said all these things, and he was very direct about it. And that's why I don't make any Trump Hitler comparisons, because I do not think that they're comparable at all.
Yeah, but their incompetence and their inability to do that and put sentences together doesn't give them a pass. Like you're like, well, they're just not as articulate, therefore they're not as guilty, and that's just not the case.
But they're not as guilty in action either.
So
the actions aren't comparable. Hitler prior to his Reichspower, prior to the Machtergreifung, as we German majors call it, even then, like Hitler was at first actually attempted a coup where he actually fought the Reichswehr, the German military at the time. I just think these two actions, these two people are just absolutely incomparable.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying so. You got to remove it, right? It makes the argument, if you're sitting around with a bottle of whiskey and you got a box of cigars, you can engage in all of this, right?
For sure, right?
Because it's an all-night conversation, right?
It is.
But separating the conversation and really just attacking the Trump and the insurrection and the impeachment, right? So this is a good way to wrap up the show, and the impeachment trial. You separate that, and he said this election was stolen, which it was not. Sure. There's no data anywhere that said it was any more corrupt than any election that had ever happened in this country that was allowed to stand.
Right.
There isn't, right? Like God knows that if they had had anything,
we would have seen it, heard all about it. Yeah.
Right. And all we heard was just like really conspiracy level propaganda that was being bantered about.
Kooky stuff.
So he whips these people into a frenzy.
Right.
And it's not everybody, right? This is the lesser fool crazy people being viewed as the 75 million, and they're not. Sure. This is a very small
group, for sure.
You had 30,000 people that thought going to that thing was a great idea, and then you had 1,800 to 2,000 that thought storming the Capitol was a really good idea.
Right.
And if you take that out of 340 million people, that is not. I mean, that's a tiny subset. If you take that out of the 75 million people that voted for Trump, that's a tiny minuscule subset, right?
Absolutely.
And there is a very small percentage of people that didn't make the trip, but they were sitting at home going, man, I agree with that. I hope they hang Pelosi and Pence.
I hear that line all the time. People say, oh, they were going to hang Pelosi and hang Pence. Who said that?
It's on the videos. They're chanting it, and then they arrested women. Chant. There were people. Oh yeah, the hang Pence thing was chanted in kind of in the background of that melee that was going on as they were trying to get in that one entrance. And then a couple of women were arrested, and there was a lot on social media about like the Oath Keepers. They have their radio conversations of, okay, so they're all in the basement. Okay, lock the doors and gas them. And that's like, that was on nationwide news, verified by the FBI, and they're charging Oath Keepers over it. So, nasty, great stuff. So, but again, so I'm gonna come up with this narrative that says the election was stolen. I'm gonna propagate it for 60 days, and then I'm gonna say, come to this rally on the 6th. It's gonna be wild. So it's all prefaced like that. His lawyer gets up there and says trial by combat, and everybody else whips these guys into a frenzy. And then the chief moron says, I will march with you to the Capitol. We're marching to the Capitol. So what that guy says matters. And that's something that we didn't act like for 4 years, where whether it was bleach getting drank and shining lights around your insides to kill COVID, or hydrochloric hydroxycone or whatever it's called is the wonder drug, or, storm the Capitol. Right. The election was stolen. What that guy says matters. And this time he should pay for it, because it was the Capitol involved, and it was an assault on the Capitol, and it was his stupid rally. It was his fundraising. Without him, those people wouldn't have been there. Without him, they wouldn't have been whipped into a frenzy. Okay. And they've impeached people after they've left office. There's plenty of precedent on that. And
who?
Not presidents, but in other positions.
Oh, okay,
yeah. Many other positions have people have committed crimes and lesser crimes, and they've come back and prosecuted them and impeached them later. So, I think they need to give this the old college try.
Well, the legal term is always beyond a reasonable doubt, right? And I think it's going to be very, very, very difficult to prove beyond a reasonable doubt.
I don't. You got him on video.
Yeah, but of Donald Trump in particular, he said, if he had said, "Go storm the Capitol for me, I need you to do this," okay, then yes, that's the easiest conviction in the world.
If you want to keep your country, you're going to have to go fight. You're going to have to fight.
Well, the term "fight" can mean politically. They are going to argue that. I was like, I'm just going to give you their defense, right? Because you got your opinion, right? And
oh, absolutely.
And legally, it's going to be a legal battle, right? And they're going to go for it, right? I'm sure. But here's the thing, and here's why I don't think it'll happen. Any Republican senator who votes to impeach Donald Trump will have the primary challenge of a century next time.
Yeah. And I think
they won't do it.
Most of these guys are made guys and gals, right? A lot of them are multi-millionaires.
For sure. Right? Well, I wonder why.
Well, right. But at some point you should say, I'm a made guy and I'm going to vote. I'm going to do the right thing here. I respect Cheney for what she did. I respect Romney for what he did, the stand that he's making.
I don't, because they're warmongers. Personally,
I know. I agree. They all are, though.
Yeah,
everybody.
Right, exactly.
Everybody.
I don't respect any of them.
Everybody, but the guy that we're talking about are warmongers.
Well, Bernie Sanders isn't. He only voted for.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So Bernie and Donald.
Tulsi.
Right.
We got a few others. There's some libertarian Republicans, I'm sure, who also, but this is me being picky and pedantic. I know.
Okay, well, we need to wrap this thing up because we've done another long one, but it was very good to be back. It was very good to do another episode.
For sure.
It was great to hear how you're doing and hear how you're thriving after COVID. And glad that you guys survived and that you're doing strong and you're going strong and you're knocking down another semester of school, and I'm knocking down another couple quarters of work, and then we're going to come out the other side of this smelling like roses. So that's it. That's about all I got. Any parting words, sir?
Well, I think that no matter what happens in this country, it will be interesting.
Oh, that's right. We're guaranteed now.
Well, yeah, we'll always have our politics will be interesting for the foreseeable future, and that'll be interesting. I'm not sure where it'll go, but I have a feeling populism next election will be back with a vengeance. I don't think it's going away.
Well, I mean, that's just like one parting shot, right? Just like it took every black woman in Alabama to stop a pedophile from being elected. I
forget that actually happened.
It took every single, it took turnout of the century to keep one of the worst presidents in history out of. I mean,
I'll take that.
one of the worst in history to keep him out of office. I mean, he had 75 million votes, for God's sakes. I mean,
the second most votes ever.
Right. I mean, that was a great way to exit. Like, guys, we lost, but we lost with the second highest vote total in the history of the election. We'll get them next time. Love you guys. I'm out of here. That's what he should have said. And it's just not in his DNA. He's an infant and he shouldn't be allowed to run again because he's an infant, man. I mean, the guy's too self-centered.
An infant. Self-centered. Yes, that I agree with.
He's got the mentality. Like Mary said, he hasn't evolved at all since 5 years old. He's still the same infant that he was. Temper tantrums, the whole thing. And he's a crafty businessman.
Is he that bad?
That's the bankruptcy king. He's the bankruptcy king. Well, we can talk about that next time.
All right. What was that?
That's the alarm. It's time. It's time to call it.
All right. Well, I will see you soon.
Absolutely. Until the next episode. Patriots United for America, baby.